So this is 2 Corinthians 12. I must go on boasting. Although there is nothing to be gained, I will go on to visions and revelations from the Lord. I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up into the third heaven. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows, was caught up to paradise and heard inexpressible things, things that no one is permitted to tell. I will boast about a man like that, but I will not boast about myself, except about my weaknesses. Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain, so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say, or because of these surpassingly great revelations. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And John 16:33 says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world.
All right, so the first passage is the Apostle Paul writing to the Corinthians. The second passage is who? Yeah, John writes it, but who's he quoting? Jesus. Yeah, that's Jesus who gives that promise. So I'm glad you're all here, and I've probably prayed into this message more than I have most. And that who would be here is who needs to be here. So I'm excited that you're all here. I'm excited to see so many people who I know here from my past, because I'm going to speak a little bit about my past. And a lot of you have already heard, it's been a tough week for me, for me and Kim. For those of you who don't know, Kim had a pretty serious car accident this week, and absolutely totaled our car, as well as the car in front of her that she hit. It's been a hard week. Kim's been in some pain, but she's getting better, and it doesn't look like there's going to be anything really serious. So I'm grateful for that. She fell asleep while she was driving, or passed out. We're not even absolutely sure, and that's not good. It was scary, and I felt extremely shaken for days. And it was bad enough that, all of that happened was hard. And then the next day, as we're starting to now have to deal with all of the ramifications of it, the insurance, et cetera, it was like a major kick to my stomach. Find out that somehow, and for the life of me, I don't know how this happened, we end up not having collision insurance. We've owned this car for 3 months. Went to the insurance. This has got to be the worst insurance agent in the world, because we went to this agent, both of us intent upon buying collision insurance, and left without it. Somehow that happened. And I recall telling them that we need everything. And so he gave us comprehensive, which is not collision. So on top of all of it, the whole thing's a financial write-off too, and just a loss. So I'm dealing with that this week. I had to wrestle through that this week, and that's personally a hard thing for me to do. It was heart-wrenching, supremely frustrating. And after this mesmerizing disbelief and even an incredible level of denial that this actually happened, after I crossed that, and that was a journey for me, that was a significant journey for me, then I had to start to try to get through it and try to find a level of gratefulness in it all too. Gratefulness that Kim wasn't hurt worse than she was. Gratefulness that nobody else seems to have been hurt all that badly in this. It could have been so much worse. And for me to get a hold of the picture that financially, we'll recover from this in about 6 months or so. That's not that big a deal, really. On the whole scale of problems in this world, of difficulties and pains in this world that you find, this isn't actually all that bad. And I had to get to terms with it. In fact, it was really important for me to get to terms with this. In fact, I knew that I couldn't even do what I have to do this morning, standing up here, if I didn't get to terms with that. Talking with Kerry this week, he talked about how many people there are out there who would gladly exchange their problem for my problem. And the truth of that, the truth is it's absolutely true. There are, and I know somebody who would love to exchange whatever they're having to go through in terms of difficulties and pains in life for what I have to go through now. It's not that bad, and I had to get a grip on that. So that's been a lot of the week for me, a lot of the week. And sort of in the process, I really found myself also saying to God, what do you have for me to learn about this? I need there to be something that you teach me in this, something that I can get a hold of that you are showing me in the midst of all of this. Because I've found that God has taught me in the midst of challenges, more so than actually in the midst of peace. So I just knew there needed to be something. So I stepped into trying to hear that this week. And I knew it needed to be part of my process. So that's essentially what I'm going to share with you this morning. So now I'm going to shift for a minute, because now I'm going to start to take you towards what God seems to have been teaching me in the midst of all of this. So a little shift here. I wanted to fill you in on something else. This is all connected. This is sort of where it's led me. About a month ago or so, we had a leadership retreat. Leaders of our church, the staff, elders of our church, we had a leadership retreat. And great retreat. Awesome time together with so many of my favorite people and in one of the most beautiful settings on earth. It was a great 3 days that we spent together, or 2.5 days. And the other thing that really encouraged me about the leadership retreat was actually, I was very encouraged and even, I would say, even captivated by the theme of our retreat and what it was we talked about. And Garth sort of approached me like a month before that for the theme, and he suggested the theme of growth. How about we talk about growth? And it was just like, yes, that is exactly what we need to talk about. And as I sort of led up to the retreat and prayed into the retreat and went through the retreat, the whole theme of growth just captivated me. Personal growth, spiritual growth, and maturity, and also the whole idea of external growth, physical growth for us as a church, and to be able to share who we are and the gospel of Jesus with others, and to invite sort of others to join us, and to be able to love them and include them in who we are and what God has for us as a congregation. It just all just really excited me. And I was just getting deeper and deeper into that theme. And to tell you the truth, I have been and feel very, very poised and ready to step into growth. I have come to this place of just deeply desiring growth for my own sake, so that I can grow to some next sort of step in my life and relationship with God, for the sake of us as a church, personally, spiritually, all of that, and for the sake of others who will find, I pray, a place amongst us, right? And God's love amongst us, and the grace of God and the salvation of God amongst us. And even more so, I desire it for the sake of God, who would in the end be praised and worshiped and enjoyed by us and others, that would accelerate to just other levels, deeper levels. So I desire all of that. Growth for all kinds of good and transformation and the power of God centered in that growth among us. And I found myself just wanting to say yes to that. Yes, Lord, yes, I want that. I'm excited for it. I want to give myself to it, commit myself to it. I want to say yes to that, Lord, as He sort of put that in front of us as a leadership. And that has been looming large in my desires and in my heart over the past few weeks. Now, let me bring those two things together. Sort of the events of my week, which were difficult for me to deal with, and sort of those desires of my past few weeks concerning growth. So again, one of the things that I've been wrestling through is, again, asking God this week, what is there in this that you want me to learn or to realize, God? You gotta show me. I know there was something. And to be sure, throughout my life, God has taught me the most in circumstances that have included a level of stress. It's almost like a sailing ship, It sails when all of the sails and the rigging is under stress. That's when the thing really moves and goes, not when it's calm and silent. So I'm looking for these answers. And as I'm praying into this, thinking and wrestling through all of this, one of the things that happened on Thursday night, I was messaging with Mallory, who's like on the other side of the world in Vanuatu, and I'm filling her in on the things that have happened because they're pretty eventful for our family. And she's all surprised about it. And then she messages back to me this one phrase. She says, "What is it with us and cars lately?" Right? Because Nate's car was totaled in an accident not long ago, and then shortly after that, our van that has been faithful to us for years and years just had this serious engine failure, which is what precipitated us parking it and going to get another car, which is the car that just got totaled. And now I'm sort of back to this. We've still got the old car, like the van that had the terrible engine problem. Now I'm facing sort of the better part of this next week repairing that significant engine problem and driving that again. And we're back to that. And which, by the way, this car also this past week, inadvertently by Quinn, got shot with an arrow and shattered the whole side window of the sliding door. So yeah, what is it with cars lately? And it's like, Mallory, you're dead right. And it's like, that dawns on me. It's like, man, yeah, it's like been car craziness. And I'm seriously and soul-searchingly pondering this. And it was very much like, and some of you might already be here, it was very much like God said to me, "Roger, does this whole car thing sound kind of familiar?" Right? Does this whole car thing in your life sound kind of familiar? Do you remember talking about car wrecks a lot in the past? How many of you have been here for a while? See, Nicholas is already laughing. How many of you have been around here for a while, say 15 or more years? Do you remember me talking about cars? A lot in the past? And what else? Cars and what? House renovations, yes! Those two things, it's like they were the bane of my existence for a big chunk of time. In fact, I remember even when Kim and I got married, sort of one of the big brunt of the whole jokes at our wedding in, the speech part of it that I got ribbed about over and over was my cars and just sort of the curse that I have with cars. And from then right through the first 15 years of our marriage, that was sort of like a theme in our lives. And it's like God reminded me of that. Because we've got a bit of a reprieve from that for the past 12 or so years. I remember I was doing so much car fixing for a period of time, and car wrecking for a period of time, and car having to switch over for a period of time. It was nuts. In fact, if you go to near the corner of 16th and 140th where we live, there is a sign on the side of the road that says, "Caution, high collision intersection." That's because of me. That sign is because of me. I had this big accident there, and like 2 weeks later, that sign went up. Right outside the house. Like, it sits like right outside my house. And I would drive by that and be reminded constantly of this thing in my life. This challenging sort of thing in my life. So that was much of the bane of my existence for a period of time. And it wasn't just for 12 years ago. It was like a big chunk of time. And God seemed to me saying to me, "Do you remember that?" And it's like, yeah, you're right, God, I remember that, because it just feels just like that. It feels like we've gone right back to that. And God says, yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? And then it's like God was saying to me, and do you remember some of the other things that were happening during that time? Do you remember some of the other stuff in your life that was going on at that time? And I'm thinking into this, and of course with everything happening, I'm going, yeah, I remember how much I was learning during all of that. That's the thing that just leapt out at me. It's like, do you remember how much learning and how much growing was happening during that whole stretch of time in your own life? And it was tremendous personal sort of challenge that was making me grow. And the other thing that was happening was how insanely the church was growing through all of that too. In the midst of all of that too, growth was going on. And a lot of it, personal growth, spiritual growth, and it's like church growth. It was like we were also at that same time under some kind of grace of growth. And it's like even in the church, the growth was pretty crazy. And there was this, and a lot of you, well, maybe not a lot of you, but quite a few of you were there during that time. I remember there, and one of the scenes that came to my mind was being where we first were at Oxford Hill. I came there when Nate was 2 weeks old, and there was like 12 people. We started a church there with 12 people. And a couple years later, I remember that little sanctuary that we were in just being packed to overflowing. Every chair we had was set up, and people were sitting on the floor along the walls. And there was a staircase at the back that went down to the lower level, and people were sitting in the stairs just to be a part of the service. And it's like God was just doing something really powerful. No one came to church late, because if you did, you didn't get a seat. That's what it was. It was just like that. And I have a picture. Do you have the picture? You know who that is? Yeah, that's Chris, right? That is like in the heat of that time period. That's when it was all just happening in a crazy kind of way. Maybe it was because of that. No? Who is that? Is that Conrad? I was wondering who that was. So there was just this incredible growth that was going on. And the truth is, so here's the truth of it all, is I don't really know exactly how that all happened. How that growth just happened. I don't know. It's just beyond me. It is totally beyond me. So what I'm saying is, I'm saying is that it was not because of me. It was not because I or we had some great plan or some awesome strategy, or that we knew what we were doing and why this was all happening. It wasn't any of that. I'm not sure why it was. In fact, here's the truth of it. I felt pretty overwhelmed in the midst of it all. Like very overwhelmed. I felt weak and incapable in the midst of all of it, and it just kept happening. And really all I did was just with my fingernails cling to the promises of God that in my weakness, God's strength would be perfected. Right? And that if this is what he's calling us to do, that he's going to take care of all of the how it gets done side of it. Just be obedient to what he's asking you to do and trust him, even though you don't know what the heck you're doing. So there was like these parallel lives for me that were happening during this whole period of my life. There was the car issues going on unendingly and the house renovations, and there was this incredible growth that was stretching me and just expanding, not just me, but the church. It's like these car weaknesses and financial weaknesses and car vulnerabilities and being forced to trust God in that. And you know what else there was in all of that? There was also this level of humility in it all too, because I didn't like it. Like for 15 years, I drove like these junk cars that were just constantly having to be repaired and would break down and that I'd crash. And it was just this sort of humility in the midst of all of that too. And some difficulty with this corresponding, very significant growth. Isn't that weird? Isn't that interesting that that would happen? That's how growth seemed to be happening during that whole stretch of time. And you know, it might sound like that whole car thing is maybe a little bit insignificant, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. There was something about this that really was challenging for me. And as I'm thinking about all of this and how interesting those parallels are, I realize it's almost like a little bit of a parable for me to live out in my life. More and more I came to realize that God was reminding me that, yeah, the car stuff was frustrating, especially for someone like you, Roger, because God knows me. And he knows what frustrates me, and he knows that that's the kind of thing that just frustrates me to no end. It's somewhat humiliating, yeah. And here's what it was. It was a tangible, ongoing thing that I had to let go of. A tangible, ongoing thing that I wanted to control in my life that I couldn't and had to practice letting go of. I needed that. I needed that. Something that I had to just give over to God because it's out of my control, even though with every ounce of fiber within me, I wanted to control it. Right? And it just happened to be something or the sort of thing that I know I'm prone to be obsessive about. I am prone to be obsessive about controlling some of these sorts of things, particularly in my life. And you know, me having to keep that in check constantly, well, I can see that I needed it. I can see that I needed it. Even as it was happening, I kind of knew that I needed it. I could see that it was an important exercise ongoingly for me, an important parable that I needed to live out in my life constantly to do the things that God was really calling me to do. I remember one time, Paul, you'll probably remember this. One time I actually admitted all of this in a sermon. Actually, I dug up the sermon, and it was from like 15 years ago where I was going through some of the scenarios I was going through with cars at that time. And I remember saying to the congregation, now don't offer me a car. What I don't need is someone to just fix this for me. Because God's teaching me something through this, and I need to work through this. And after the service, Paul comes up and says, Roger, I heard what you said, but I've got a car if you need one. And then he went on to say, but it's not a very good car. It's still kind of a wreck, so it'll probably still do that for you if that's what you need. And I never did it, but because I think we were into some other car by then, but it's like that was just such a big theme in my life back then. So back to the things that God has been showing me and reminding me. I want to keep that theme going. Through all of this, what's God been showing and reminding me? From this point, see, there's more. From this point, I felt God challenging me to now, Roger, start to remember some other things that happened during those years of growth. Okay? So it was that car thing that was sort of keeping my ego and my trust in God in check and not letting me become obsessive with control, because I couldn't control things. I had to let things go. And then on the other hand, there was the tremendous growth that was happening. But then there was something else, and God said, do you remember some other things that were happening during that time? Because you've heard the phrase growing pains before? It's a very accurate phrase. Anytime there is growth, there is also a level of stress, pain. It always comes because there's change. And change is not always easy. There's always hard and challenging sides to it. So it's like God started to draw my memory towards that. It's like, yeah, those were kind of golden years for the church. But you know what? There were some challenging things happening then too. And it's like God said, do you remember? Do you remember some of the other stuff that was going on? For example, here's what he brought to my mind. I'm going to give you a little list of things that he brought to my mind. You'll know, some of you will know some of these. He says, do you remember, for example, that very spiritually unbalanced woman who found her way into your church during that time and actually started coming to your home group for a period of time, and all of the bizarre, absolutely bizarre trouble that came from that person, and just the brokenness and craziness that she was living in, and bizarre circumstances that actually ended up with her threatening the lives of your children. Yeah, like, I'm going to kill your children. Do you remember that too? Yeah, that was part of it too. That was happening in the midst of it all too. It actually ended up in court. Do you remember, for example, God was reminding me that elaborate satanic pentagram with all of the curses against the church and against you and against your family that was left on the door, the back door of the church on Sunday morning before worship for us to find? Roger, do you remember that too? That happened too in the midst of all of it. Do you remember, for example, the phone message? Do you remember the phone message? Do you remember, for example, the phone message that was left on the church answering machine of this just strange, it sounded like a woman's voice claiming to have killed a person in the park. And they're confessing this. And then the voice starts to change. The voice just started to change, dramatically change, demonically change, hideously, cackling, hissing, claiming that it was now going to come after you and your family. Do you remember that? That one also ended up with the police. Do you remember the spiritually unhinged guy who happened to come to church on the day that we were baptizing several people and like almost attacked you because you baptized these people in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit? And something about you doing that just drove this guy a little berserk. And it's like he had to be restrained. Do you remember the young lady who also went a little bit berserk? She came on a communion Sunday. Imagine this, on a communion Sunday, and she went just a little bit crazy, and then crazier and crazier every time the phrase, the blood of Jesus, was mentioned. And she just, on a communion Sunday where it's being mentioned a lot, and she just progressively is just becoming unhinged at the hearing of this phrase. Roger, do you remember all that too? That was all part of the growth too. That's what God was reminding me. You see, as there was growth, what God was pointing out to me, as there was that kind of growth, there was also push back to the growth. That's what was happening. That's what God was reminding me of. You see, there were forces that were pushing back against that aggressively, quite aggressively. You see, there was a battle that was going on, a spiritual battle, and there always is. There absolutely always is. But when you start shining light into the darkness, when territory is being taken over for the growth of the kingdom of God, it comes from somewhere. It comes from some other authorities that had that territory before. And when you're pressing forward with the kingdom of God into other territories, into other strongholds, the battle intensifies. And that's what God was reminding me of. If you just draw lines, boundaries, and we'll stay here and you stay there, the battle's not that intense. But as soon as you start pushing into that other territory and reaching out into it and frankly saving people out of it, it intensifies dramatically. And do you remember that was happening too, Roger? It's like what I was very much hearing. And you know what I know? I'm going to tell you something that I know. I know that I would not be able to deal with that kind of stuff myself. That's what I know. I know that. Beyond a shadow of doubt, I know that. It is beyond me. It is beyond my control. That control, that thing that obsesses me, it's beyond that. It's beyond that. And if I'm going to deal with those sorts of things, I cannot control them. I have to trust them into God's control. And if God's going to put me in a position to deal with those sorts of things, I have to let go of that. I have to practice, I have to learn how to let go of stuff like that I really want to control. Beyond my control. If I tried to handle that kind of stuff myself, I would have been flattened. I know it. That is what I know. God has to deal with all of those things in my weakness so that his strength can be perfected right there in the points and the areas of my weakness. And the challenge for me is to trust him right there where I know I can't do it, or where I'd like to, but it's just out of my control. I needed a lot of practice on that. I needed this ongoing parable in my life to keep me there. Kind of like Paul's thorns in the flesh, to keep him in that same place. I've even come to realize that if God had graced me with success in that growth and overcoming those battles that came with that spiritual growth, which he did, but if he would have given me success there without keeping me in those humble places, without playing out those humbling parables in my life constantly, there is a good chance that I would have become prideful and confident in those successes. I know there is, because I know me. I know me well enough to know that. Arrogance and self-sufficiency and comfortableness would have taken root, and I very well may have been lulled into thinking that it was me. I probably would have said, oh, well, isn't it great what God did amongst us? But yeah, I did pretty good too, didn't I? It would have been like that. It'd have been like that. Oh yeah, I'm going to give credit to God, but I did pretty good too, didn't I? It would have been just like that. I know it. I remember we went to Disneyland. It's our only whole family trip to Disneyland when Silas and Quinn were 5 years old. And we went on the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland. Remember that one? You get into this Indiana Jones Jeep sort of thing, and there's 4 rows of people sitting in it, and you go through this crazy, and the car's on tracks, right? You know that, right? It's got wheels and everything, but the car's on tracks. And it goes through this crazy wild ride, and you're just missing things, and the Jeep's swerving all over the place. And the interesting thing about that ride was there was a driver's seat with a steering wheel behind it. Only one driver's seat with a steering wheel behind it in the whole thing. And Silas ended up sitting 5 years old in the driving seat. And he's going, I can't drive. And we're all going, oh, you'll be fine. Just give it a go. And he's just he's got this look on his face with his hands on the steering wheel. And we're going through the ride, and he's just everywhere, just missing things and just wow. And we get to the end of it, and he gets out, and he's panting. And he says, I quote, he says, wow, I didn't know that I could drive that good. And it occurs to me that I can be exactly like that. In my life, I can be exactly like God's got me on this track. He's heading me down those paths of righteousness and difficulty, steering through all this difficult stuff. Right? He is my shield about me. He is my strength, my salvation. He directs my every step through difficult terrain, just like it says in all of those amazing passages in Scripture. And I can get to the end of all of that and go, wow, I didn't know I could drive that good. Idiot, you're on tracks. God's taking care of you. It's not you. But I can be like that. We can all be like that. So for me to be humbled and sobered by some life happening around me that knocks me down a little bit and makes me have to trust God, even in those places where I didn't want to have to. I wanted to take care of that one, please, Jesus. No, you got to trust me with that too. In the end, I'm grateful for it. In the end, I'm actually very grateful for it. And in the end, I've come to realize that your grace is so so sufficient for me. Right? And that your strength, God, truly is perfected in my weaknesses. And God, protect me from ever getting to the point where the successes that you give me and the good paths that you ultimately lead me down, that I think that I'm doing it. Or at least that I'm doing pretty good too, aren't I? God, protect me from that. And keep me humble like Paul. If Paul needed it, I probably need it too, right? If the great apostle Paul needed that in his life, that sort of parable of those thorns in the flesh in his life to keep him in that place of humility, lest, he come to the point of saying, I'm doing pretty good too, aren't I, God? Then I need it too. Then I know that I need it too. And if things are going to happen here, if God is poising us for some exciting things to happen, then I'm absolutely okay with stepping back into some of those parables in my life to learn to remain in that place of humility. So to answer my ultimate question, God, what should I learn? What should I learn? What's my final word on this? I felt like God was ultimately in the end to me saying, you want to grow? Good. That's good. That's good. You say that you want to say yes to the growth that I have for you. Good. But are you sure you are ready for all what it will require? Right? Including a humble heart and deep dependence upon me and to the way I'm going to do it and to the things that I'm going to do and how it's going to look in the end. Are you really committed to whatever yes is? To whatever that yes is. Are you really committed? Because you know what, Roger? You won't be in charge. You won't be in charge. Sorry, you won't be. And you have to be prepared for that because God knows me. And he knows that I really like to have control in my life. I don't know if I'd like to be in charge of things all the time, but I do like to be in control of my own life. And he's saying, yeah, you're going to have to let go of some of that. You might have to let go quite a bit of it. But you can trust me. Because guess what? I can even do it better than you. And he can. And he can. So I'm going to close with a story, actually, that Katie shared with me this week. She was her and Nate are doing a course in Hebrews in Okanagan Bible College. And from one of the lectures, Katie shared a story with me about the professor, actually, who's teaching the course was telling about this time he was in. So it's this whole idea of saying yes to God. He was in an African-American congregation in the States somewhere, and he was in the congregation and part of the service. And at the beginning of the service, the organ player sat down and started playing the organ. He's just like this amazing organ player, playing these rhythms and these notes and just playing for some time. And then he just starts saying, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. And he keeps playing and yes, Lord. And then one lady starts joining in with him and saying, yes, Lord. And he just keeps playing harder and harder. And more people start joining in saying, yes, Lord, yes, Lord, until the whole congregation is just chanting, yes, Lord, yes, Lord. And he's playing, and then he just stops with everyone just, yes, Lord. And then the pastor or the preacher gets up and he walks to the podium and he says, okay, Lord, you have our answer. Now tell us what it is you want us to do. Because you don't really get to know in advance. So, are we ready to say yes, Lord? To this incredibly broad idea of growth amongst us. With no restraints, wiping out all of your own expectations and assumptions of what that looks like and giving it entirely over to God. No matter what it takes, no matter what it costs, no matter what kind of pushback there is, no matter how much you'll have to depend upon him and give over to him. Are you ready to say yes? Lord, no matter what, we want what you want for us. Are you ready for that? That's what I was left with. And for me, it's yes. Yes, Lord. I'm ready. Amen? Chris? God, I thank you for your grace, which is sufficient. In fact, every time I read that passage from the Apostle Paul, I feel like he is very intentionally making the grossest of understatements. God's grace is not just sufficient. It is so much more than just sufficient. It is just abundantly more than we could ever dream of or ask for. And I thank you for that, God. And I know you've got us. I know you've got us. I know you're behind the wheel. I know we think we are sometimes, maybe a lot of the time. But God, take us. Take us. Teach us what you need to. Help us to learn. Amen. Scott.
Just want to take a risk. So think about this. The curse that you were under in the car, right? God used that to good, right? Teaching public acceptance.
Yeah.
Do you think that needs to continue?
I don't know. I've been asking that a lot. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, let's do that.
Hey, Huzinga clan, get up here. Kim, and Zola, and twins.
Nate.
Nate, I guess you can come up too.
I'll stand here. Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for this family, for Roger, for his leadership. We thank you so much for how you have moved through him and stirred us to want you passionately and to grow and to say yes to you. Lord, you have used the circumstances, and you are always the master of using disasters and challenging circumstances for good, because that's who you are. But you've also clearly imparted that you, Jesus Christ, became a curse for us and hung on a cross so that we did not need to live under a curse. And so, Lord, we pray in the Holy Spirit that you now remove this curse and you send it far from this family to dry and waterless places, and you protect them in vehicles, and you provide for their vehicle needs as you did. And that there will be safety and protection for them. And we just ask you to bless them where there was a cursing. Let there be life, growth, and blessing. In the powerful name of Jesus Christ we pray.
We pray over Kim for full and complete healing, for nothing to remain after this is said and done, Lord, that she will completely walk away from this without any impingement or hurt or harm or anything, Lord, that she will be able to move as freely after as she was able to before.
God, we just step into your calling for this church. And God, we ask for your hand to be on us and for your will for us, God, for your calling on us for growth in our hearts, in our lives, and in our people. We pray for your hand upon us, God.
Yeah. Yeah. So the song that we're going to sing now is kind of I'm asking you to respond, right? So there's an opportunity for us to respond in this very song.
I just feel like I'd just share something. Nate, yesterday, what happened when the altar call happened at the church for me? When Nate and I went to a leadership summit yesterday for our church conference. Do you remember what happened to me? Yeah. What? Yeah, I did. What did I do? Bawl my eyes out? On my knees? Yeah, it was really embarrassing. Super embarrassing. So the guy that was preaching did an altar call, and I already was crying. And funny enough, so weird, because exactly what Roger just said at the end of that was, I realized in my heart I'd said a no to God. And I realized that I'd said, I'm tired of the pain. I'm tired of struggle. I'm tired. And I had said a no in my heart to him to serve him. And the call was, are you willing to serve God whatever the cost? And so I didn't really know what would happen. I knew that what he was saying was, we have to step into our conviction of what the truth of the Bible is. We need to step into the truth of what God's calling our churches to. And there is a cost to that. The world is in a place where they need the truth. It is desperate. And are we willing to step into leading people to know Jesus? And anyways, it broke me. And I'm not really sure if I'm ready to say yes. It's honest truth. I sat there and I cried, and it wasn't because I was saying 100% yes. I can say that right now, even as Roger's saying that. There's a big cost to saying yes, and I know that God wants blessing on us and not curses. So that's an interesting road for us to walk as a leadership team, because I know that God doesn't want to hurt us, to harm us, but I also know that saying yes means something really significant. So anyways, I'm putting it out there. Let's be in this journey together. Let's ask him how to truly say yes to him.